Hey everyone, so today's episode will follow a different format in which I will be going through a section of my regimen. In this episode, I will be going over my mood and what supplements I take to keep my mood optimal. Before I do that, I want to go through some basic things that I do that are not supplement related. For example, my diet. So my diet, I cut out grains and legumes, and I found that that was very helpful for my mood. That isn't the case with everybody. That's something that's heavily genetic. So you have to check your genes and see if you have sensitivities. But if you're getting inflammation, that will not be good for your mood. Another thing that I would consider basic is sunlight, getting enough light, sunlight, even more important than getting sun in your body, which is also, is I would say it's a mood booster, but sunlight is number 2. Sleep would be number 3. And, getting a minimum amount of sleep, whatever that is for you. For me, it wavers. I would say, let's say it could be 6 hours, it could be 7 hours. But making sure you get enough sleep is one of the basic things to improve your mood. For me, drinking enough water is important for mood, and exercising is important as well. And that kind of goes together with cognitive function. I noticed that my mood and cognitive function get worse if I'm not exercising at all. Now, I've gotten more into exercising, and so the mood benefits it's not necessarily linear, meaning like I don't think my exercise regimen has given me a better mood because I'm exercising more. So I think the main thing as it relates to mood is making sure you get a minimum level of exercise. And that could be something not, for me, I found that just walking and doing one set of push-ups was enough to, be sufficient to improve my mood. Okay, now let's get to the supplements. One of the first things I take for mood is 5-HTP. Now, 5-HTP is this thing that increases serotonin, and I've discussed this a bit here and there, but I want to discuss it a little more in detail here. And this is something that is also highly genetic, that it depends on if you have a certain genetic variant for this TPH2 essentially gene, which converts tryptophan to 5-HTP. My functioning of that enzyme is not working well for a couple of reasons. Now, again, it's something that you could measure in your genetics, your lab tests, and you could put that picture together. For me, there's basically 3 cofactors to that enzyme, which is calcium, niacin, and folate. And I have some certain genetic problems with folate, and for a reason that's still not clear, I was deficient in niacin even though I was getting 4 times the dosage of niacin in food and supplements. And niacin isn't necessarily something you want to take in high dosages if there is no clear need. But it was very clear to me, based on a lot of different markers in my blood, that I was deficient in niacin. And some of those markers included niacin itself. Some of those were more advanced tests. Some of them had to do with lipoprotein A, LDL, and phosphorus. I think actually if your phosphorus levels are higher, that could actually be a good indicator of niacin deficiency, because the low levels bring it back down. And so my phosphorus actually were not in the optimal range, and that was flagged by the lab analyzer in self-decode. And so through self-decode, the genetics part and also the non-genetics part, and also combining some of my own experience, I was able to understand that I needed 5-HTP. And I was also able to understand that this certain enzyme that converts tryptophan to 5-HTP was for some reason deficient. I didn't understand fully why until only a couple of weeks ago. And now I understand, because I was deficient in niacin and I wasn't getting enough methylfolate either, even though I was getting a few times the RDA for both of those. I think that had to do with it. Calcium is another cofactor, but I was getting enough calcium, so it wasn't the limiting factor for why the enzyme wasn't working well. So getting back to 5-HTP, I would say that 5-HTP is a game changer for me. The game changers are things that have a significant impact on some area of my life. that alters the course of my life, right? What that means is that with 5-HTP, for example, my mood was no longer unstable. So I was always in a stable mood, no matter what was happening, even if, shit hit the fan or something, even serious things, I was always in a stable mood, and I still am, from the 5-HTP, and I would consider that a game changer. Now, because I got more advanced on exactly what was wrong, for example, I needed more methylfolate and more niacin, I'm able to not take 5-HTP, but I still find that it works for me because I don't want to take methylfolate or niacin at night because they have wakeful promoting effects. Both of them are a little unique in how they do that, but essentially the methylfolate increases dopamine. Niacin increases dopamine, norepinephrine, but niacin also just stimulates the mitochondria and it creates wakefulness. And so methylfolate and niacin are not things I want to take at night, and I find that because my system needs a lot of serotonin and and the enzyme's not working as well as it should, even if I take a lot of niacin and methylfolate in the day, I do notice that my sleep is better at night if I have 5-HTP. It's not really for the mood. It's kind of a little bit for the mood and a little mostly for the sleep effects now. And so I still take 5-HTP, but it's not as important. I wouldn't call it a game changer at this stage, but it is quite. I think it is quite important still because of its effects on sleep, and also it can give that added benefit to mood, even if the enzyme is working, okay, because I'm taking a lot of those cofactors. So I'd say in terms of how much 5-HTP I take 100 milligrams a day, and I take it in Joe's Mood Daily. I used to split it up between the morning and the night, but now I'm just experimenting with it in the evening because, like I mentioned, I want to get more serotonin in the evening, and I used to want to get it throughout the day, but now because I'm getting the serotonin from the niacin and the methylfolate in the morning, I can get the 5-HTP at night. In terms of my megadosing experiments, I've taken 400 to 500 milligrams a couple times in the past to see what the effect was. I don't recommend taking above 200 milligrams a day, and I think 100 milligrams a day is quite enough for the vast majority of people. And Joe's Mood Daily has a bunch of other ingredients in there that increase serotonin. So I do think 100 milligrams a day. It's just not one of those supplements you want to take high doses of. So I really do recommend not more than 100 milligrams. And it's also one of those things that if you take too little, like 50 milligrams, I don't tend to feel it as much. I really do need that 100 milligrams a day. So I think for most people, that range could be anywhere from either not needing it or 200 milligrams. I think 100 milligrams is the sweet spot for the vast majority of people. Next up on my mood list is Thymine. I would consider this a game changer. The reason I discovered this was actually from lab testing. Unfortunately, there's no good genetic predispositions for Thymine. And the way I determine if I'm deficient in something is if I take a small amount of that thing and it has a very strong effect. So, for example, I think for Thymine, I noticed once, I remember, that this is already after Joe's Mood Daily. I was, and I'm getting Thymine in Joe's Mood Daily because it's in there. And I get some other sources of Thymine. And, I was getting a good amount of Thymine as it compares to the RDA. But one day I was taking Joe's Mood Daily and I felt that I was, I was stressing my system a lot. So I was stressing my nervous system by doing a lot of exercise and socializing and working a lot and really, going to the sauna and really stressing my nervous system. And so it typically happens when you stress the nervous system, whether it's drinking alcohol. I was also drinking alcohol back then, not excessive amounts, but, drinking alcohol, eating carbs, all these things basically tax your Thymine. And you could be getting more than enough from the RDA, but if you're taxing your thymine, then you need more. And I've done experiments after that where I was even getting 20 or let's say, I don't know, 15 milligrams a day, and it still wasn't enough. And I know it's not enough based on if I feel stressed out, then I know I'm not getting enough thymine if I'm on Joe's Mood Daily. So the serotonin is kind of like the base, and that generally takes care of any kind of stress or mood issues. But if I see myself getting stressed in some way from overexerting myself, and again, you could say that this is normal. People just get stressed from overexertion, right? People need to just recover. But, for a biohacker like myself, I don't believe in that. I think that you should be optimal in even when you're stressing your body. And so thymine was one of those things where I realized, well, first of all, I do need it in higher doses than the RDA, even if I'm not stressing my system. So that's number one. I think the RDA does not fit me with a whole bunch of nutrients. One of the biggest mistakes I think I've made in my life, really, is listening to the RDA. I just think that the RDA is built for basically, short term, looking at some people that have a certain amount of a nutrient. It doesn't seem like they have any issue. But, if you have young, healthy people that are robust, you're not going to find an issue if you give them a certain amount of thymine for a certain amount of days or a certain amount of niacin. And so you're not really going to see, and if they get a little bit of anxiety, they're not even going to know it's anxiety. They might just think that this is normal, right? I'm a healthy person. Even when I wasn't getting enough thymine, I didn't realize that there was any issue at all. I thought I was perfectly healthy. And so you don't know when something is not right unless you've been in another situation. And so that's why I think all these studies are flawed, because they're not really looking for optimal. And you wouldn't even be able to tell optimal if you tried, right? Because these people who are healthy that they're doing studies on, they don't know what optimal is. If their testosterone is half the level that it should be, they're going to be considered healthy people because, well, they've got average testosterone. They're not complaining. It's really just if they're complaining about a health issue or if anything is like super out of norm. So I think that a lot of these RDA studies are bullshit. I do think that most people need more than the RDA for most nutrients. That's just my personal opinion. I could be wrong about that. Could be just something relevant to me, but I do know for myself that I need more of the RDA than most nutrients in order to be optimal. In order to maybe not be optimal, I might need the RDA, but to be optimal, I need more. So getting back to thymine, I think that this is one of the things that I take more of when I have more of a need. So if I'm in a very stressful situation, thymine basically solves the problem. And typically I'll just take more in general so that I don't have to get to a situation where I think, oh, I need thymine now. I just take extra now. And I'm typically taking around 50 milligrams a day. And I'd say that 25 milligrams a day would do the trick in all situations. In terms of what I feel from it, what I notice that, again, I'm more resilient, a little less introverted. I don't need to do that recovery period when socializing a lot. And the effects feel more like GABA than anything else. So it's kind of like the 5-HTP covers the serotonin. And GABA I'm not particularly bad with, but again, when it comes to those high need periods, I need that extra GABA, and that comes from thymine. There are other mechanisms, including ATP, energy, serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, and being an antioxidant. But I really just notice the GABA subjectively. The others I don't think is as strong. I don't really notice any acetylcholine or dopamine effect or serotonin strongly. It's really, for me, I just notice the GABA effect and maybe a little bit of energy. I have done my megadosing experiments were with 200 milligrams, and I do notice a significant effect when I take even 50 milligrams. And so it is something that I notice pretty strongly. 5-HTP, thymine, these are things that I notice pretty strongly. The next up is resistant starch and butyrate. I would definitely consider this a game changer as well. This has quite unique effects when it comes to mood. So it helps with food tolerance, number one, and that's probably the number one reason why I take it. But even if I had nothing else, I'd say that butyrate is really able to just, really fix my mood. The only problem I would say is with resistant starch is that it takes 20 hours for the butyrate to start being produced. And you can't really fine tune it as much as you want. You can't just say, okay, I want more butyrate right now. I want less now. You kind of have to plan your butyrate 20 hours in advance because it takes that long, give or take, depends on the individual, but it takes that long to hit the large intestine. That's where you start making the butyrate. So I would definitely recommend butyrate. I think this butyrate is definitely one of the biggest game changers. The amount of things that it helps with is unbelievable. And I do take resistant starch as my form of butyrate. I'm experimenting with another, capsule of butyrate that it only basically breaks up in the small intestine. And that's mainly to get a small amount of butyrate in my small intestine to create some oral tolerance. I don't think that's needed. It's kind of in the experimental stages. But really to get the most butyrate, the bulk of the butyrate that I'm getting is from the resistant starch. And you're not going to get that from pills. Not even close. Now, what else does this do? Okay, so there's food tolerance I mentioned. There's mood. In terms of the mood, the mechanisms of action are HDAC inhibition, which is basically changing your epigenetic expression. There's a lot of talk about epigenetics. There's a couple basic ways that your supplements or lifestyle can change epigenetics. Part of that is through the SIRT pathway, like SIRT2 and 1, SIRT3, and that's things like resveratrol and things of that nature. And then there's HDAC, which is histone deacetylase inhibitors. They basically, change your gene expression in a very profound way, and they have a very unique effect. So butyrate is something that has a very, very unique effect on mood because no other mood stabilizers that are natural really work on the histone deacetylase mechanism as much as butyrate does. They work on some other mechanisms, but not on that mechanism. So valproic acid is the closest drug in terms of histone deacetylase inhibitors. But butyrate also works on GSK3 beta inhibition, which I have certain variants there as well that that produce extra. You want to actually inhibit that in order to improve mood, and that actually leads to serotonin. So that's involved in many pathways. I don't want to get involved in that now, but essentially it increases serotonin. I feel the serotonin effects pretty acutely, and so it's definitely very strong. I feel the BDNF effects, definitely something I feel. And it has a different kind of tone of BDNF than certain other things that increase BDNF. Increases Krebs, and I could see why. I can feel that GDNF, NGF, GABA, dopamine, norepinephrine, endorphins. I kind of feel that it has a very wide-ranging impact, and that makes sense. And it's also an anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. So those are all the mechanisms by which it improves mood. And I think there's nothing like it for a mood stabilizer. Now, what else is butyrate good for? It's good for cognitive function. It's good for wakefulness. It's good for energy and your mitochondria. It's good for kidney health. And it actually hits the butyrate itself hits a unique receptor that's a little different than the HDAC inhibition. It's called GPR109A. And this receptor is very important for creating immune tolerance. And it's actually called the niacin receptor. So there's only two things that hit this receptor, niacin and butyrate. Both of those things work really, really well for me. And I think that has to do in part with that receptor, the GPR109A receptor. And now you understand why I like that so much and why we sell it. because I didn't see any good resistant starch on the market, and I wanted to make sure that that was available. In terms of how much I've taken of it, I've taken 150 grams a number of times in the past, but now I only recommend 20 grams a day. And for different reasons. For me, it's because I'm taking a lot of other stuff, number one. Number two is if I take too much, it could interfere with my sleep a little, but 20 grams does not do anything to my sleep. Again, it depends on where you are. If you take too much, like over 40 or 50 grams, you might have some gastrointestinal effects. Again, that's just because you're consuming a lot of fiber. Your gut is not used to it. Over time, I think you could deal with it more. But I recommend starting out with 20 grams. It's just a good amount, and you can go up and see what your limit is, your individual limit. But it is a great supplement. Hope you enjoyed this. Please subscribe. Please like. Please review. Whatever it is, YouTube you like, iTunes, review it. And this way I will do more of it if I see that people are really liking this stuff.